Hello and welcome to Stock Talk. I am your host James Orr. Stock Talk is a monthly farm advisory service podcast where we talk to farmers and other industry professionals to bring you the latest information and advice from the livestock sector. Today we're talking about deer farming in Scotland, the growing interest in venison and what the future holds for the sector. Joining me are two guests with a wealth of experience in the deer farming sector. First up we have Dick Playfair from the Venison Advisory Service. Dick works closely with producers and processors across the sector and will be giving us an update on the current market and discussing how changes in wild deer management may affect supplies and prices. Followed by Dick, we have Janet from Tullynessle Farm in Aberdeenshire. Janet and her family have been working in deer farming for many years and have developed a successful business that includes direct sales of venison and farm tours that help connect the consumers to where their food comes from. Dick, welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Doing all right, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm good, thank you. A bit hot. Could you introduce yourself, Dick, and can I give the listeners an idea of what the Venison Advisory Service do?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Dick Playfair. I'm a director of the Venison Advisory Service, which was a company set up just over 10 years ago to support people who were interested in going into deer farming, looking at that as an option. So we've been on the go for quite a while now, and my colleagues Alan Snedden and John Fletcher are very much the gurus of the company. I look after much of the admin, but also the marketing side and, if you like, the data, that type of thing. I also wear another hat, which is Secretary of the Scottish Venison Association, the trade body for venison coming out of Scotland. So that is venison that is both wild and farmed, public and private sector. And we look after the promotion of both the producers and the processors. So that's fairly all embracing as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned there wild and farm venison. What's the difference between wild venison and farm venison?
The difference in terms of volume produced is fairly dynamic, because the market really is dominated by the wild side. While in terms of tonnage, wild venison output from Scotland is about 3,600, 3,700 tonnes. Whereas venison from our deer farms is probably just about 120 tonnes, so about 3% of the total outturn, if you like, from Scotland. Major difference in terms of product, I guess, is that with wild venison, we have the result of a harvest which has to be undertaken for environmental purposes, for biodiversity recovery, for meeting the climate change challenge, if you like. And there are some fairly significant targets that have been set recently. An increased cull of 50,000 animals per annum, which probably takes the wild cull up to about 180, 190,000 beasts a year of all species. And what I have to say is that obviously on the wild side, that cull is taking place because we have animals out there that are old, are infirm, range in age, obviously from birth right through to 15, 16 on the hill, and they have to be managed. So if you look at the venison product coming from them, it can be very variable across the piece, and also variable in terms of the time of year when it's harvested. We now have a situation with the abolition of the stag season where basically venison can go into the food chain at any time of the year. There's still a close season for hinds, but in terms of stags, it's open season all year round. From a farm perspective, you have something completely different. You have what I would like to refer to, I think, as extensive farming. Animals given a lot of space but enclosed, all slaughtered at the same age, in an abattoir rather than shot by a single bullet, one hopes, on the hill. And therefore, in terms of what they eat, their forage, what they're fed. It's a much more reliable process and a much more reliable product at the end of the day. And some would argue um, that actually it's a superior product because we know exactly what's going into it. We know where those animals are coming from. We know what age they're being slaughtered. Whereas the wild side, it's far more unpredictable. Now, a good chef will tell you that it doesn't matter what the animal looks like. They will be able to do something with it that will make it into, the best meal you could possibly have. So I'm neither here to, if you like, defend or protect one side or the other, because the hat I principally wear is one of the promotion of venison, which is where we're very keen to get more consumers eating that, buying that, asking for it in restaurants and butchers and so on.
What kind of trends are you seeing in the demand for venison at the moment? Is it, is it an increasing demand? Is it increasing year on year, or is it varying? What's going on?
Bizarrely, in terms of trends, the market is actually fairly static. For example, recently, 2024-25, we saw something like 6% increase in the UK market, but 225-26, we've actually seen that increase completely die away. What we have seen is an increase in terms of value. So less product going into the market, but the value of that product has been greater. And that's the way it's tended to have been actually for the last, I guess venison, like a lot of other red meats, was really on an upward curve. Then we had COVID, everything took a bit of a knock, and we're really now in a process of recovery. And I think the venison market is still trying to find its feet because other red meats like beef and lamb were the preferential choice very quickly after everything started to get going again. Venison, being much more niche and much lower volume, has taken a lot longer to actually get back to where it was prior to COVID. And obviously, other factors involved in that, like the war in Ukraine, which significantly put costs up for deer farmers and that sort of thing.
So for demand for venison, like, what drives consumers to venison? I mean, are they looking for a premium product, or are they just looking for that, kind of slightly different taste compared to other red meats? Why are people eating venison?
I think a lot of people eat venison out of curiosity. I mean, it's still a new product for a lot of people. And wearing an optimistic hat, I would say that that gives us tremendous opportunity. I mean, we're talking to a market that really is at the early stages of adoption in terms of venison, which is great. So, there's an awful lot of ground we still have to cover. Um, yeah, I mean, in terms of premium product, venison has been labeled with being top end, expensive, posh nosh, that type of thing. And that's probably been to its detriment. A lot of people wouldn't go near venison in the past because A, they might not know how to cook it, what to do with it. It might be a bit scary on the shelf. It's like, well, we don't normally have that, so why would we have it this time? But what we are seeing now is a much bigger swing back towards popular meats, popular cuts. So we're talking, sort of mince, burgers, meatballs, that type of thing, which is significantly bringing the price down. But actually, for once, we now have venison on the shelves at a price which is less than top end for beef, for example. So, we're talking £30 a kilo for venison steak in the supermarket, whereas your prime fillet might be out there, beef for 35 upwards. So if anything, too, that is a slight advantage that we now have. We're not right at the very top end, but we've got a lot of other hurdles to overcome.
So with venison, then you've got these kind of two different products. You've got farm venison and you've got wild venison, and you're in quite a good position to be able to answer this question. Then, but the we're in the hat you do that. You're involved in both. You've got effectively two different supply chains there. You've got a uniform product that's maybe reliable in terms of its delivery. A farm can guarantee a certain quantity to a certain buyer at certain times of the year, whereas you might not get that same the reliability and uniformity with wild venison. mean, how do these two supply chains interact, and what kind of markets do they meet? Do they, are they selling into the same shops, for example, or is it?
Well, it's really interesting having Janet on this podcast as well, because I think what we're starting to see is that the traditional, and I use that sort of guardedly, but the traditional route to market for farmed venison has been to sell in through a major processor into Waitrose and Marks and Spencer. And farmed venison has very much been a product that they have taken through Dovecote Park. Now, Dovecote Park have been able, simply because of the position they're in, to gauge what is happening in the market, to gauge what the market output will be like through those key clients. And in terms of price, we're actually now seeing the price start to come back to where it was before. And in fact, as I understand it, the price for farmed venison will be over £7 a kilo come September, which is great for the sector. If that's guaranteed, again, as I understand it to be for 3 years, then that's also great for the sector. But without speaking out of turn, what Janet has done, which is really very exciting, is to have seen that having one outlet on its own isn't actually the best position to be in if you want that market security. So actually going out and doing your own thing is very, very important. And this is something across the whole of the wild and farm sector that we're trying to encourage, which is for producers to get involved in local processing and be able to service local markets or markets further afield, because there's tremendous volume to be gained by looking after your local market rather than having to rely on the fact that your beasts are going to have to travel right down to Yorkshire to be killed and then go for national distribution. Now, clearly, there's great price sort of benefit in that. And when it's working well, there's tremendous security in that. But probably equally, the satisfaction on the farm side lies with having your own animals on the farm, overseeing their slaughter, taking them to market where you would like to market them, whether that's through a farm shop, farmers markets, local butchers, other retail opportunities, local hotels, for example. Um, and there are tremendous opportunities opening up there, both for wild and for farmed. So I think sort of both supply chains need to run in parallel. We're not talking all about huge volume into multiple retailers. We've also got to look at much smaller volumes going into an awful lot of local market opportunities.
Hmm. So you're saying the wild market and the farmed market have to kind of work together. But is there an effect on the farm price? With this increased cull, so we're seeing so the government's increased the kind of target for the wild deer cull because of kind of the numbers we've been culling so far have kind of failed to control the population of wild deer. Are producers going to be affected by that increased supply of wild venison?
I think from a wild perspective, the producer, if you like, the stalking estate will tell you, and the data is there to prove it, that they are harvesting those beasts at a net loss. So, for example, we know from data produced by the British Association for Shooting and Conservation that it costs something like £2.76, or let me try and express this in a sort of more understandable way. The net price paid per kilo back to a producer stalking estate from the game dealer could vary between £1 and £1.50 per kilo. But the cost to that producer is £2.50 upwards to about £3. So for them to go out and shoot more deer, they're actually being asked to go out and incur a greater loss. And the price from the processor, from the big AGHE, isn't actually moving that much. I think it will move in due course, but at the moment, it's still quite depressed. So, you've got these guys who are under pressure to harvest more, but also under pressure to make the books balance for their rural business. And it's not an easy position to be in. So we've been pushing quite hard for a venison subsidy, yet to be achieved, a national one that will plug that £1 per kilo gap. And we think that would really help, if you like, to get the cull moving. But obviously, what's also required is investment in the marketing end of things, because we don't want to see all these extra beasts going into market, going like coming off the hill, and not having a market to go to. It's absolutely crucial that that product, that healthy protein, has got somewhere to go, and that those businesses that are producing it actually are sustainable in more ways than just being environmentally sustainable.
How important is provenance in marketing venison?
Its provenance is turning out to be hugely important in the marketing of venison, as with any Scottish product. I think the Knowledge Bank produced a piece of work fairly recently, 2025, which actually, from a venison perspective, placed the most associated region for game coming out of Scotland as Aberdeenshire. So Janet certainly has a big look in there. Shift over from Highland. Highland obviously still is significantly important in terms of game, but the epicenter now appears to have moved to Aberdeenshire. But provenance from Scotland, or Scottish provenance, absolutely crucial, because not only do the Scots prefer, as this research tells us, to be eating Scottish product, but actually the key venison markets in London, the southeast east of England, they also would prefer to see a Scottish label, or would be impressed to see a Scottish label. And even in this piece of research, there's a line which says that the Scots are prepared to pay more in terms of being able to access a Scottish product. And this isn't provenance literally, which just boils down to being Scotland, but also in terms of being regional and then very local. So buying local is clearly the direction of travel, I think, and we can't understate provenance enough. We are exceptionally fortunate to have this protein, natural protein in Scotland, which we all should be very proud of. And the fact that it is Scottish is certainly one that adds value to it.
Thank you very much, Dick. So, if one of our listeners is wanting to get in contact with yourself or your colleagues at the Venison Advisory Service, or just to even follow what you're doing, what kind of work the company's doing, how are they best to do that?
Yeah, just online, venisonadvisory.co.uk, or you can email me, richard@venisonadvisory.co.uk. And to point you towards the Scottish Venison website, that's scottish-venison.com. It's a new website. There's loads of recipes on there, and loads of listings, including, I would say, Janet and Tullynessle, who we're very pleased to have there as well, amongst other producers and processors. So, yeah, if you're interested in venison and the backstory, the farm story, or just finding some really good recipes and what to do with it, then do look at the Scottish Venison website.
Thank you very much, Dick. So, well, it's a question with two parts here. So, the first part, for if you were talking to a farmer who is considering getting into deer farming, what is your kind of top bit of advice for them? What would you recommend they do or consider if they were thinking about putting on a deer farming enterprise?
That's the first question.
That's the first one, yeah.
Okay, so just in terms of that, I mean, I think our advice would be to really do your due diligence. Costs have all moved drastically over the last 10 years. So, fencing, for example, dramatic increases upwards. in steel, the investment now will be considerably bigger than it was 10 years ago. And the actual security of the market itself, I think, still leaves an awful lot of uncertainty out there. So I'm not saying it's a huge gamble, but I'm saying it may not actually be the time right now to be thinking this is a good time to invest, to be going in. For those who are already there, and we recognize there are quite a few deer farmers who have pulled out over the last 3 or 4 years, but for those who are already there, then looking at the sort of stock market analogy, they bought their stocks. You know, they're invested, and probably for them, things will get better. I mean, that move in price that Dovecote Park have announced is probably as good a price. I'm sure Janet will concur or disagree with me if I'm wrong, but that's probably as good a price as Dovecote Park have come up with in the last 10 or 12 years. So, that is moving in the right direction. And I think, we've got so much in favor of venison just generally in terms of, healthy product, people being more aware about healthy eating, this price differential now emerging between beef and venison that makes it more competitive. There are a lot of good things happening, which could actually make this a very good time if you are in the business of farming venison to be there. And if you're brave enough, like Janet, to be looking at not just one income stream, i.e., Dovecote Park being the be all and end all, but also thinking there are other ways to do this. There are other markets I can explore. There are other benefits we can generate. And, whether that is things like the visitor attraction side, the open day side, all of that, which, is really very important in terms of educating people about an animal which they probably don't really understand that well. So, that ambassadorial bit is equally important. That, getting people to understand not just deer farming, but deer and what deer are like and how they behave and all of their attributes as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dick. You actually answered my part two of the question. My second part of the question was to what bit of advice would you have for producers who are already in the sector. Thank you very much for joining us today. I could talk to you for hours, I'm sure, about deer. I do really like venison myself, so I certainly can. I can tell the listeners that it makes a very good lasagna. Okay, thank you very much, Dick. Secondly, we have Janet from Tullynessle Farm in Aberdeenshire. Janet and her husband Willie have been farming red deer for many years and have developed a successful business that includes direct sales of venison and farm tours that help connect consumers with where the food comes from. Janet, welcome to Stock Talk. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good. So, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little about your farm, Tullynessle, please?
Yeah, sure. So we farm red deer for meat, and we also offer walk and talk tours to promote the venison industry. We've been farming deer for nearly 10 years now, and for most of that time, I think 7 or 8 years, we were supplying Waitrose and M&S through the Dovecote Park route that Dick was speaking about. It was only when there was hiccups in that supply chain, it made us feel super vulnerable. And also we wanted to promote the industry more. I felt that not enough was being made of this fantastic product that we were really proud to be farming. It was an industry we were proud to be part of, a really nice network of people, a lot of support. And yet nobody was telling the story of Scotland's only native red meat. And and the healthiest meat and the easiest animals to farm, I felt. And I felt there was a great story to be told there. Also connecting people more with where their meat comes from, because that's becoming more and more important. Being a grandparent now, my grandchildren were having the opportunity to see exactly what goes on the farm, and we wanted to share this with more people. So the business has developed quite a lot since then.
So I mean, did you? Am I correct in saying that you purchased Tullynessle? Is it 2013?
Correct. Yes, that's
Correct.
when we
Yeah.
bought the farm. Yeah.
So you bought the farm in 2013. What made you choose deer farming? Why not sheep? Why not cattle? Why deer farming?
Yeah, that was interesting. So we went to a farm advisor and we had a feasibility study done that compared sheep to deer. We bought the farm mainly as a retirement venture, so that when we wound up our other business, we wanted to live somewhere remote in the country. My husband's a farmer's son, and so he wanted to farm the land. So we compared 140 sheep with 40 deer. This was the approximate amounts of animals for the small farm that it could carry. And we mulled it over for about 6 months. At this point is when, as Dick mentioned, the Venison Advisory Service has started up with its series of meetings informing people. We attended maybe half a dozen of these, visiting other deer farms, learning as we went. And the whole thing was kind of exciting for us. And we sat at home one day and thought, well, what do we do? Do we go and spend £50,000 on fencing and infrastructure and get deer? Or do we spend nothing and get sheep? And it's not as easy an answer as what it might seem, but we weren't excited by the sheep. The thought of having deer on site kind of thrilled us. We were already keen venison eaters and loved the animals. And just the thought of living and looking out my window on deer, it just was something that we felt we wanted to do more so. The other thing about deer that was very good for us is we run another business and we don't have a lot of time on the farm. And deer are accounting for, I think there's about 3 days a year that we handle the deer. I mean, they obviously need feeding and checked every day, but there is literally 3 days a year that we run them through a handling system. We had sheep in the very beginning. We started with sheep and we were handling that. We only had 40 sheep. We were handling them nearly every weekend for one reason or another. So that was a big plus as well for us, the fact that the deer are healthy animals and take care of their own health without any input from us. So the two things together, we just decided we're going to spend this money because we're going to make £10,000 a year, which we would have made whether we had sheep or whether we had deer. That was the approximate income on those numbers. And so then in 5 years' time, we've paid for our infrastructure for deer, and then we've got nothing to do but sit, enjoy the views, and watch the deer graze. Or so I thought.
Yes, I mean obviously deer are kind of so recently domesticated in Britain. I mean they are kind of, they've still got the, they've still got that kind of survival of the fittest, the genes in them from the wild herd, haven't they? That they're very healthy. You don't have the same kind of health problems you have with kind of species that have been domesticated for longer.
Well, it's quite remarkable, but in all the time we've been farming deer now, we have yet to treat an animal with an antibiotic. I mean, that's just an incredible feat in itself. It's not only that the deer are healthy and they take care of their own health without the use of chemicals, it's also the fact that it's the healthiest meat for us. So it's not only native to Scotland, and Scotland's iconic creature is the red deer stag, but it's the healthiest meat by quite a long shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for any kind of beef and sheep farmer or any kind of farmer in another sector, listening to this podcast, it'll be amazing to hear, like the fact that you've not used any antibiotics in well over a decade of deer farming. So for listeners like that, for listeners who've never visited a deer farm, I mean, what does a typical year look like for a deer farmer?
Well, so everything's done with the seasons, because deer, again, being from the wild, and still being wild in in Scotland, they are fully guided by the seasons. So as the nights draw in October, the red hinds come into season. The stags are there ready to rut with their antlers in hard antler, and it all starts with the shorter days. The hind comes into season and gets pregnant, and then the calf is born in May, roughly from mid-May till the end of June, when in Scotland we have our best grass growth. They know this because this is how the animals have evolved. So in a farmed environment, we put the stags in with the hinds in October. Well, we do it a bit before, maybe in mid-September, to let them settle in a group. And the stags stay there for about 6 weeks. And then mid-November, we just open the gates and the stags just leave. By then, their job's done and they're kind of happy to leave the herd, and then everybody stays in their own groups throughout the winter. We bring the calves in. We choose to do that because there's a bit of a pecking order goes on, and the hinds might chase the calves away from the feed ring during the winter. So to help the calves go through the winter quietly and come out the other side in good condition, we bring them in November, and they live in a polytunnel and they get fed hay every day. This also helps them get used to human contact. So as we're going in there every day, they become used to us. As soon as the grass grows again in April, we put the calves out onto fresh grass, and they would go on to being 18 months to 2.5 before we produce them from them. The same time as that, or soon after that, it's time for the calves to be born. And during calving, the red deer do this really well on their own with no intervention from us. So there's no getting up in the night to check what's happening with calving. There's no pulling out a calf. They just get on with it. They do really well, and they're really good mothers, and just as nature intended. There's been no interfering. There's been no intensive farming that's changed the deer.
Yeah, I think we've got a few kind of deer farms down our way, and certainly from what they say, it's kind of like calving. You just like leave them alone. If you go and try and intervene, it's going to cause more problems than it'll solve. I mean, we've touched on that deer are very different from other livestock, and Dick had touched on the kind of the infrastructure required. What are the other challenges that come with managing a deer herd compared to like another livestock?
Well, the handling system is the main thing. It's the fencing and the handling system. Once that's in place, I don't think there are any other issues to be dealt with. The marketing aspect is quite big, I guess. You know, the amount of people that haven't tried venison or think they don't like venison, which is why we then decided to start having these open days. And we've probably had around 1,200 people, maybe even more than that now, have attended the farm. And most of them that come have never tried venison, think they don't like it, and I give them a sample, and they're surprised with how mild it is, how much they do like it. And then when they find out about how they're farmed and how nutritious they are, people leave thinking twice. Next time they see it in a shop, they're going to consider buying venison, which was the whole aim for us. You know, we just wanted to develop the industry. I think venison accounts for, Dick would correct me, but I think it's maybe 0.4% of UK's red meat sales, which for me, I found shocking to think that this is our native species and our healthiest species. How can it be so small? So I guess that's a combination of access to markets, which we're trying to fix, and the stigmas that Dick spoke about it being known as being expensive or a rich, heavy meat that needs to be cooked for 12 hours in red wine. I mean, that's just not the case. It can be as light. It can go with anything. I mean, your bolognese, whether it's lasagna or even Thai flavors go very well with venison. There's nothing that doesn't work with it, especially if you're getting a consistent product that's milder and soft and
Yeah, I think that answer leads us on really quite nicely to my next question, which was, I was going to talk about your diversification. So, you'd bought the farm, you went and decided that you're going to be a deer farmer. What led you to start a kind of, direct marketing? What led you to putting in your own facilities to process the deer and try and sell them direct to the consumer?
Well, there was two. I was already trying hard to promote. I felt that Waitrose and M&S, who I was producing for, were not doing enough to promote it. I never saw anything to be promoting it, and the longer I'd been in deer farming, the more I'd learned, the more I felt this was a story that really needed to be out in the public domain. And I did ask a few times about it, and I was told on one occasion that they felt the best way to market venison was to discount. And those words kind of broke my soul, to think that the best way to promote such a fantastic product as this is to sell it cheap or buy two get one free, and it would maybe sell, but that didn't educate the public. So I wanted to do a promotion. And then there was a year when the market was slow, and we were told in August that our prime stock that was ready for going away in October would be taken somewhere, instead of going in October like it had done every year, they would take it somewhere between January and June the following year. And that was a devastating blow because we're a tiny farm. We had the maximum amount of animals, and suddenly we've got an extra 60 than what we should have to be farm assured on farm over winter. We'd already ordered our hay, and it's just our grass got hammered that year. The feed costs were astronomical because of the amount of animals that we had. For doing everything so well and so right and caring for the herd, to then have that to deal with, that was no fault of ours. And there was no alternative. So it was at that point I contacted Food Standards Scotland, and I thought, well, this, at least if we register for on-farm slaughter and become a small flow abattoir, I can then market our meat direct. I can market it as I want. We can make as much noise as we want because we know that we're doing everything by the book. We're not only meeting the UK food standards, but we aim to beat them on every occasion. So I can stand there and beat the drum and shout out and welcome anybody to come to the farm to see what we're doing with confidence that we're doing things to high standards. And that's kind of where it started. And then once we got running with it, it's just off we've gone.
Yeah, it's just kind of snowballed. With regards to the kind of facilities you need for like to process your own deer, what was involved in getting the setup correct, getting it all approved, and making sure it was all above board and making sure you had all the correct kind of licenses.
Well, I mean, it was a tough call on me because I didn't have any knowledge of the area, but the Food Standards Scotland vets have been incredible. They've been very supportive right from the start, and it positively encouraged us, I would say, saying all along, we'll help you, and they did. But I had to learn about HACCP, which I'd never heard of before, and I can only liken it to learning Japanese in a month. I mean, it was the biggest ask of me, where I would read a document maybe 5 times and still not understand what it was telling me. That was tough getting through it, but I would just kept going back to my auditing vet and saying, what does this mean? What does this mean? And he would break down something that's you needed a chemistry degree to understand, and he would just give me 10 bullet points or 50 bullet points on occasions. And then I had something I could work with. And actually, it was all common sense. It was just making sure the lingo was something that I could understand exactly what we were required to do. The actual facilities on the farm that weren't that hard to create. We just needed a clean space with a potable water supply, a knife sterilizer, a couple of hooks to hang the deer on. It wasn't that onerous. The issues was understanding the rules of HACCP, understanding UK food standards and the requirements for temperature controls. We already were treating the deer with respect, and we learned how to treat the carcasses with the utmost respect as a public food source.
Yeah. Just for my benefit as well as the listeners, what's HACCP?
Hazard analysis and critical control points.
There you go. Cool.
So we had to create a flow chart. So from the day we decide we're going to do a kill or process, we created a flow chart. We get the tractor out, the guns checked. We make a choice of which animals we're going to do. How do we choose it? What could go wrong at the point of bleeding? Everything you just think, right, okay, this is what we're going to do. What could go wrong at this point? How do we control that and mitigate anything? And every single step, I think I had a 60-point flow chart. So each point you look at and you think, what could go wrong? What can we do to mitigate any risk to the public at this point? So, it was a gutsy document to create. And had I known at the beginning that I had all this to do, had they given me the full story, I certainly would not have gone the route. But I was kind of drip fed. It was like fill in an application form. It's £100 to apply for on-farm slaughter. And then, you need to do this and you need to do that. And then also my husband and my son, who carry out the slaughter, had to get a certificate of competence, which in England, I believe, is called a WATOC license, and it's about welfare of animals at the time of kill. And that took an auditing vet had to witness them do 4 animals each, and a 1-to-1 exam that took about 50 minutes, all based around animal welfare. So, I mean, although it was onerous, we wanted it to be done right. We wanted it all made sense of why we was doing it, and we understood it. It was just jumping through one after the other that it felt like a lot. But there we go. It's done. It's behind us.
So I mean, having these processing facilities on farm, has that helped you build a relationship with the consumers? It helped you market your venison? Has it been
Oh,
beneficial?
well, it definitely helps me benefit. It helps me market the venison. I mean, and because of having gone through all that, we make a lot of noise as much as I can. I'm delighted to talk about it, talk about what we do, open the gates to the farm, which we moved up there to get away from the public. We picked somewhere 5 miles up a one-track lane just because we didn't want the public. And now here we are shouting out, welcoming anybody. We even have international visitors coming to the farm now through Visit Scotland. We love talking about what we do. We're proud of what we do, and we love sharing the story, not just for us, our farm and our brand, but for Scotland's red deer and the deer industry and our other fellow venison farmers. It's just, I just feel it's just a noise that needs to be made, and everybody that comes leaves buzzing and amazed. And people like to learn stuff, and it just seems to work really well.
Like we touched on venison as a product a bit earlier, but I've actually got one of your leaflets sitting in front of me where you're laying out the benefits of venison, or how you're comparing venison and its nutritional qualities to other meats. So here we mean the kind of the nutrient categories you've got here. You've got calories, total fat, protein, saturated fat, iron, and B12 levels. Venison beats every other meat in those categories, with the exception of two, whereas chickens is slightly higher protein and slightly lower saturated fat. But it looks like it's very nutritional. Have you seen any kind of changes in consumer attitudes towards venison, like as a health food?
Oh,
You
for
know, is
sure. People that come on the farm tours and they see I've got a big chart on the wall and they look at the nutrition and people are amazed. I even had a couple of vegans came to the farm one time, a mother and daughter, a lovely couple that were bringing fallen apples for the deer in the autumn because that's a real treat for them. And they saw the iron levels that's in the venison meat, and they were both low in iron and on supplements, and decided that since our deer were so happy and fed their apples, that they would take burgers. And they have come back since and bought. So people just don't know that it packs a punch, and all this sustainability and eat less red meat. With venison, less is more. You can have half the amount and still gain all the nutrients that you need and the iron levels. So it's, yeah, we're just passionate about it for every reason. I mean, it's never going to take over beef. The beef farmers have nothing to worry about. It's not going to feed the world in that way, but it can be a part of everybody's diet just to make sure you're getting the nutrients. And just if nothing else, just because it's Scotland's own.
so we've touched on the kind of farm tour side of the business. I mean, how did that come about? Did that follow the implementation of the processing facilities, or was that before?
It actually started first because when I was having an issue with getting rid of the meat, and I contacted various bodies, including Opportunity Northeast, and just wanting help to promote the industry. I wanted to help Waitrose sell more venison so that they would then take more off me and pay me more for it. And I just wanted to market it. And it was suggested that I take part in the Aberdeen Provenance Festival, which I did about 4 months before we decided to do the on-farm slaughter. And we opened the gates for the very first time. It was a daunting experience to welcome public onto the farm. I was really worried about the public coming to the farm, the responsibilities on me as a farmer in taking care of them, things that can go wrong with children. But the Environmental Health and Aberdeenshire Council helped me through the steps required to ensure that we were doing everything that we needed to do. And then for 1 week, I had allotted times, and I think we might have had about 20 or 30 visitors. And I asked everybody to give reviews because I was asked from the Provenance Festival to give reviews. And they said that Tullynessle Deer Farm got one of the highest responses back from satisfied people that had been to the farm. And it amazed me how much I enjoyed doing that, giving the tours, welcoming people, going for a walk round, talking about what we do, and seeing their faces gasp as they realise how amazing this meat was, how amazing these animals are, and how they are still the only native ones to Scotland. I loved sharing the story and I loved seeing the feedback. But at that point, I couldn't let them sample it because I wasn't approved. And there's no Waitroses anywhere near me that I could go and even buy the meat to serve it to these people. So I had to wait until we got approval, which was later, the early spring the following year. And once I had that, then I decided to really do a lot more of the tours. And then with Visit Scotland, I've decided to open it up internationally. That maybe won't sell me the venison, but it's just raising awareness of the product and helping with what our initial goal was, to make a lot of noise for the venison industry.
Mhm. Yeah, what are visitors most surprised to learn when they come to the farm? You know, what's the one thing they all say?
It varies because my visitors are, I've had nursery groups where I've had 18 3-year-olds. I've
Yeah.
had school children. So it varies on the age. With some people, they're really keen to know about the food standards and the slaughter and what the rules and regulations with that. With others, they're just amazed at seeing deer up so close that you can touch them. Others, it's a stag. The stag antlers is probably quite a big one. When I have an antler there off of a stag, and it's enormous. It's off one of our 5-6-year-old stags, and there's just one of them, which people need 2 hands to hold. And when they realise that's 4 months growth, and it's bone, it's not keratin. That's pretty astounding news. And the nutrition chart also, I think they're surprised at the vitamin B12 and the iron levels and how high they are, and the lower calories than chicken. So yeah, I would say the nutrition and the antlers are pretty amazing for most people.
Mhm. How important is it for you in your marketing strategy, that kind of the farm tours? I mean, well, obviously you might not know this answer, but how many sales do you think the farm tours drive for you?
Well, I was thinking about that this week actually, because I don't think on mine, I don't think it's that much. I mean, people generally will go away. If they're local, they'll generally go away with a few packs of meat to cook at home. But sometimes when I'm having tourists coming in, they're not taking the meat home. So I'm not generating a huge income of sales from that. But it's just those people are always amazed by what they've learned and the experience on the farm. They're going to go away. And I say to each one of them, you're now an ambassador for me. You can go and you can share this story, what you've learned, a bit of what you've learned with your family, with your friends, and just help the market generally. So it's a long-term thing. It might be a long time before I get as a business, we get it back. But locally, there's definitely people are knowing now. And I would reckon that a lot more people in Aberdeenshire are going to see venison on a restaurant menu and they're going to be saying, where did this venison come from? What species is it? Things that they would have never thought to have asked before. And hopefully somewhere along the line, Tullynessle Deer Farm will get known for producing excellent quality venison and people will want to see it on the menu.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, more broadly, I mean, how important do you think it is for people in the agriculture sector to engage directly with the public like you're
Oh,
doing?
incredibly important. I think it's a great area for farm diversification. It's great. You should be proud about what you're doing. And I'm quite sure that most farmers are. And why not open up your gates and show people what goes on and let them learn a bit more about UK food production, because our standards are amongst the best in the world. And it's a story that we can all share a bit of.
So, I mean, there's been a lot of change for you and your family in the last 13 years since you bought Tullynessle. What's next? Is there any big plans in the pipeline?
There is. I am really desperately keen to get on-site butchery. At the moment, we're using several local butchers who can fit us in, and I would really like to have a facility on site so that we can butcher our own. Not because there's anything wrong with the butchers that we're using, but we're not their core business. So for the consistency and the quality of the product, and to be able to change it and to be able to produce it to orders. If I get an order in for a certain type of burger, I need to wait until I can get the animal and line up the vets, line up the butchers. If we had in-house, we could just go to a carcass and go and butcher it ourselves. I'd also like to do some more things like venison haggis and use a carcass more. I'd like to be able to offer stock and change what we're producing. If there's something happening that we could do something a bit different, it would just give us more control over our product. So that's something I would really like to be able to do. Also for growth, I'd like to see the business grow more, and at the moment we're doing maybe 50, 60, might even be up to 70 carcasses now a year. I think it would be good if we could make that 3 or 4 times that amount, because to make a profit, I need to scale. And I'm sure we can buy in from other farm assured farms to help develop the business if it grows that big. I mean, that's the pipe dream. But in the meantime, we're happy doing what we're doing, working with local butchers and supplying local restaurants. But always got the goals set, the end goals set on the bigger picture of how good can we make this? How big can we make this be?
Mhm. And am I correct in saying you've also, Tullynessle has won some awards in the past year?
Yeah, we were very, very, that was probably my most exciting moment to date, was when we were awarded Best New Business or Best Young Business at the Northeast Food and Drink Awards. And at that point, that was only in June last year. So we'd only been operating for a few months. That was really exciting. I felt proper recognition for that, and it was lovely. And we carried that as far as we could. And I still take the award with me to all the farmers markets and put it proudly on the table in front of us.
Yep, yep. For someone who's never cooked venison before, what dish would you recommend as your first venison dish if you're going to be cooking venison for the first time?
Well, there would be 2. So, I mean, a fillet steak or a bit of loin, pan fried in butter for 2 minutes and rested for 5. I mean, that's as good as it gets. Or, I mean, mince is another good for a family. It's cheap. And by the time you add your onions and your tomatoes, you're making a ragu or whatever it is for your family. They're not going to think, oh, what is this you're giving me? They'll just think, oh, that's a little bit nicer than normal. That's a little bit softer than it usually is. And you're going to be helping their health benefits along the way. So sausages and burgers sell best with us. That they're our biggest sellers. And I think it's because people know what to do with them. It's a very easy meal to do. But there's lots that you can do with venison.
Yeah, yep. No, I'd personally recommend venison lasagna. It's very good. It's very good. So, Janet, for our listeners who are interested in finding more about Tullynessle and maybe coming to visit you or maybe buying some of your venison, how would they best to find you?
Well, we've got a website, Tullynessle Deer Farm. You'll find us on there, and our venison's all available to buy online. You can visit the farm. There's links for the farm tours and for booking them through the website as well. Just, get in touch and say when you'd like to come, and we'll see if we can arrange it. And I'm on social media as well, so we're promoting away everywhere we can.
Is the social media Tullynessle Deer Farm?
It is. It is. Yeah, so we're on Instagram and we're on Facebook. We've also just taken on a member of staff, which has been quite an exciting bit for me. We had an intern from Aberdeen University worked with me for 8 weeks in March and April. He's a third-year pharmacology student, and he wanted to do the internship at Tullynessle Deer Farm because he was interested in the health benefits of deer through medicine and as well as the nutrition of the meat. The health of the animals really appealed to him as well. And he's been such a great support to us that we've decided to keep him on. He also wanted to continue working with the farm because during one of our open days, he managed to link up with a professor of archaeology that's doing some studies at Aberdeen University, writing a paper on venison and on antlers study that they're doing on some antler bones that was found in Angus recently. They think they could be over 10,000 years old. And so I was able to give them some antler off our farm for them to use in their carbon dating. And our intern, Andrew, was really excited by this and wants to be part of what's going on. He's got lots of ideas for involving the university, for doing work with Healthy Heart Foundation and various other things. So it's a pleasure to have somebody that's got as much enthusiasm as me on board to help us for a few hours a week.
Yeah, no, it's so important to get young people involved in businesses. They bring that kind of enthusiasm back into the business, and drive the thing forward. Janet, thank you very much for coming on Stock Talk. It's been fascinating to hear how you've built your business up, and how you've managed to involve the public and use that to try and get people more interested in venison. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm afraid we're out of time now. Thank you very much to Janet from Tullynessle and Dick from the Venison Advisory Service for joining us today. Links to their websites will be included in the show notes, so listeners can click on the links there and go and learn more about their businesses and perhaps even arrange some farm visits. Thank you all for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and join us again in future for discussions on Scottish agriculture and livestock production. Until next time, goodbye.
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 Thank you for listening to this episode of Stock Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe or follow, and make sure you tune in next month for our next episode. Stock Talk is hosted by James Orr, produced by Kirsten Blackwood, edited by Kieran Sim and our executive producer, Kerry Hammond. If you would like to get in touch or get more information about the podcast, please check the show notes for more details. Stock Talk is produced for the Scottish Farmed Advisory Service in association with the Scottish Government.
The Farm Advisory Service Podcast. Audio advice on livestock, crops and soils, environment, rural business, and more. Brought to you in association with the Scottish Government.